The challenges in manufacturing biologics. A key objective in medicine is to improve patients' health while ensuring their safety. One breakthrough that has revolutionized medicine and helped meet this objective is the development of a newer type of drugs called biologics. More than 200 biologics have benefited millions of patients worldwide. Biologics are very complex molecules. Because of this, each step in their manufacturing requires rigorous quality control and testing to ensure their efficacy and safety. Prior to the development of biologics, most drugs were composed of small molecules, which are developed in laboratories by using chemical building blocks that are bound together in discrete chemical steps. There could be multiple methods to manufacture them, allowing the drugs to be duplicated and sold by multiple companies when patents expire. Small molecule drugs include most drugs taken orally, in addition to some given by injection. In contrast, biologics are usually proteins, can be up to 1,000 times as large as small molecule drugs, and are given by injection or infusion. Because of their complexity, biologics must be manufactured in living cells. Since their introduction approximately 30 years ago, biologics have helped more than 325 million patients worldwide. Manufacturing a safe and effective biologic medicine requires tremendous effort and vigilance. Every step is critical. It is this rigorous commitment to quality that helps ensure that each dose is both effective and safe for patients.
Please. Yeah. Is it my turn? Or... Should I? I don't know. Should I start? Or...
This is Professor Laurent Brouet. He's Department of Pathogastroenterology, University Hospital of Nancy, France, and the head of the Inflammatory Bowel Disease IBD unit. He is the current president-elect of the European Crohn's Disease Colitis Organization. He will speak today about the unmet needs and the challenges in current management of ulcerative colitis. Okay, Professor Brouet, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So it's my great pleasure to be with you. I would prefer being with you in Egypt, but we have to do it by conference, video conference. You know that the world is becoming crazy with
next
this
time.
virus. So,
next time.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope that next year we'll be able to come to your fantastic country. So I would like also to thank Pfizer for supporting this meeting because without Pfizer we could not do it. Even if the scientific content and what I prepare is totally independent, I would like to thank them too for supporting your meeting and my presentation. So I think that we are changing everything. I will not talk about Crohn's disease, and I think it's good because I think you are all convinced that Crohn's disease is a progressive, disabling, destructive disease. If you look at ulcerative colitis, my feeling is that it should be exactly the same. You see patients, the main problem is that they are often undertreated because of the possibility to undergo colectomy and the perception that disease burden is lower in UC than in CD. If you look at colectomy, in fact, colectomy is not a cure for UC. You have short-term complication, but let's look at long-term complication. You see that 40%, 4 out of 10 patients will have some complication. Pouchitis, fecal incontinence, and even some mortality. So we cannot say the drugs are failing. Let's call the surgeon and cure the patient with UC. This is not the case. very importantly, if you ask a physician or a patient, which disease would you prefer to have? They always say ulcerative colitis. But in fact, if you look at disability, if you look at fatigue, it's exactly the same in ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. You can see here for fatigue, you can see here for work disability. You have the same number during follow-up with UC and CD having work disability. And in this study that we published a few years ago, what is very interesting is that we look at disability in a population-based study. And what we found is that there was no difference between CD and UC in terms of disability. It was exactly the same. So we can say that disease burden is exactly the same for both diseases. I think, and if you do that, I think that if you are looking more and more at the disability, you will see that the disability is the same. The perception is that disease burden and disability is lower in UC than in CD. But if you look really by evaluating carefully disability in UC, you will see that it's the same in UC and CD. UC is also a progressive disease. You have disease extension, you have structural changes, you have strictures, you have cancer, you have functional abnormalities, anorectal dysfunction. So this is something that is very disabling. If you look, and this is something that we forgot, is that you can see some stricture in this patient. And in this stricture, we know that there is an increasing risk of colorectal cancer in patients having stricture. And the risk of cancer when you have a colorectal stricture in UC is 10%, while it is only 2.4% in Crohn's disease. So if we try to look at the course of ulcerative colitis, you see that it's almost the same than in Crohn's disease. You have some bowel destruction, disease extension, altered motility, rectocolon narrowing, and then surgery. So, in fact, it's a little bit the same between CD and UC.
Maybe now it's better, no? I'm sorry, yeah? Oh, yeah, you should have told me, yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry, yeah. Very sorry. So, now what should we evaluate in our clinical practice? It's something very important. What should be evaluated in our clinical practice? The real burden of IBD is that you have everything. You have bowel damage, you have abdominal pain, hospitalization, cancer risk, anemia, surgery, disability. So you see that when you put everything together, you have a lot of disability in both UC and Crohn's disease patients. If we try to look at the disease severity, and I think it's something very important, when you try to look at disease severity and disease burden in both UC and CD, you have many domains to consider. You have impact on patient, you have inflammatory burden, and you have a complicated disease course. And when you consider that, you see that both are progressive disorder. When you look at the overall disease severity index, this is what you have to evaluate in your practice. If you don't do that systematically, you will lose many things. So what you have to do, it's to say to your patient, to interview your patient about everything: mucosal lesions, disability, CRP, biologic use, hospitalization, steroid use, anemia, and so on and so on. When you do that, you will see that you have a lot of problems in ulcerative colitis patients. So I would say, after this first part, what we can say is that you have a similar impact on patient life, similar disease complication, similar post-operative course, similar monitoring, similar treatment goals, and similar economic burden between UC and CD. So what can we do? I think we have to be much more ambitious in this patient. We have to change their life and disease course in UC to be more ambitious what you have to do, it's to, how can you say that, to do some monitoring. You have to assess remission and endoscopy. This is very important. You have to do symptoms and endoscopic remission. So you have to treat symptoms and the intestine. When you have a Mayo, this is where you are. This is a minimum. This is a minimum you have. It's endoscopic Mayo 0, 1, or you have Mayo 0, and then you can have histological healing. I think that now, more and more, we are looking at Mayo 0 because the evidence is accumulating that when you reach endoscopic Mayo 0, it's much better than an endoscopic Mayo 1. So I think this is something very interesting. We are more ambitious. And now, as you know, we are even looking at histological healing, at least before stopping drugs and so on. When you look at histological healing with this, it's probably the ultimate therapeutic goal. We need more data, we need more findings, but you need to look at histology in these patients. You can use the Nancy index, probably you know it. We have it systematically now in our endoscopic report at my clinic. We do systematically the endoscopic score for UC, and we systematically do histology. I know that now almost everywhere in the world, they are doing systematically the Nancy index on pathology report in UC. They do it everywhere. It's in the public domain. You need to ask your pathologist to do this evaluation. It takes 10 seconds, but it immediately tells you whether your disease is active or not, and especially looking at neutrophils, that is the most important to define disease activity. So this is the Nancy index. I will skip this one. So the other point is everything about calprotectin. I think probably it is time to update the STRIDE recommendation. We'll see, they will be published soon. I think that we cannot repeat endoscopy, and probably we need to look at calprotectin. Optimizing your treatment based on calpro is something that is very nice and should be considered. Now we have some evidence. We have 2 randomized control trials telling us that optimizing according to calpro, it works. And honestly, I don't know what is the access in Egypt, but it's fantastic. Now I use it in my practice for all UC patients. It's really fantastic. So if I try to summarize what we know currently, is that we are moving from clinical improvement to histological remission. And when you look at clinical improvement to histological remission, this means that you are lowering the level of calpro. Currently, the level of calprotectin that I'm using in my practice is 150. Before I was using 250, now I am using 150. So if we try to summarize the management of UC, I think that the most important is to monitor the patient. Monitor, monitor, and monitor again. What you are using as a first line, anti-TNF, tofacitinib, is not so important. The most important is to monitor your patient carefully. The main problem, and this is something that is very important, is that when we do that, because we are more ambitious, we have more drug failure. When we were only looking at clinical response, all drugs were working. But now that we are looking at endoscopy, histology, symptoms, and so on, we are increasing a lot the risk of drug failure. So we need new mechanism of action. We need new drugs, such as tofacitinib. So this is the reason why nowadays we need more therapeutic options, like in rheumatoid arthritis. So what to do nowadays? I think what we have to do is that a top-down for all is probably too much. A step-up for all, you have a risk of undertreatment, so just do that. Rapid step-up approach for everybody. All UC, all CD patient. Tight monitoring of signs of inflammation. This is very important. This is the key. This is the key for that. So you have to do that. You have first line and prognostic factors who do not really matter nowadays. So this is very important. What is the biggest challenge by doing that? It's also the physician perspective. We have to convince physicians that they have to do treat to target. We have to convince patients. It's not easy. The patient has to understand that he has to do the treat to target. When he's feeling well, it's very tough, very, very, very tough to do that. Then you have the cost effectiveness, and then you have adherence to fecal calprotectin. It's very important. Yeah, it's very important. All these things are the major barriers. All the things are the major barriers. Physicians, patient, cost effectiveness, and adherence to fecal calprotectin. The main problem is that it's not always easy because compliance with fecal calprotectin, we know that the adherence is not optimal, and this is what we know. And here in this study, what we found, it's a study that we did a few years ago. We found that 1/3 of patients were adherent to fecal calprotectin, only 1/3. And in fact, it's the same with all screening tests, such as colorectal cancer screening. It's very tough because patients have to understand, they don't like manipulating stools and so on. So what we did, and this is something that we have started now 2 years ago, and we just published the first experience. What we did is that now we are using calprotectin at home. What is totally crazy is that this test is cheaper than the regular one. So it's about 40 euros. And then I receive every morning on the department computer the result of calprotectin. And with that, we can double the adhesion rate to calprotectin in this patient. This is something that we published a few days ago. Now we have 70% of patients doing the test and very satisfied with that. Because patients want to stay at home, not only during the COVID era, but they want to stay at home. This is very important. And with that, this is fantastic because you can immediately detect a relapse in these patients. So, because I know that you are a little bit late, I tried to focus on all these aspects. And now we have time, if you wish, if you have enough energy, and if you still want to discuss with me, we can take some questions, and I will try to answer these questions. Thank you for your attention.